Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Tag Collab podcast. This is where a little bit of science meets culture and every transition can become a transformation. My name is Terry Arvizu Gonzalez, and this is your space to unpack generational scripts that we've inherited, the ambition we carry, and the healing we're reclaiming. Look, whether you're navigating a pivot in your career, motherhood, or your own identity, every episode blends a little bit of research backed insights with raw, reflective storytelling. We'll explore how our brains are wired, how our cultures shape us, and how we can lead others and ourselves through the in between. This isn't just a podcast, it's your permission slip to grow, grieve, and glow if you need it all at once. So today I'm going to be talking to you about my latest article, which is called Let It Shine, Alignment and Intended Purposes. You know, when I was in Catholic school, there was a simple song that we used to sing in kindergarten, and it was, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine." And at the time, it felt like a children's song. But as I've grown up, I've come to believe that it carried a deeper truth. That light wasn't something I had to invent. It was something God had already given me. The light that shows up in the forms of strengths or natural gifts as a child, then even as an adult, of course, the things that come alive in us without being forced. Our responsibility isn't just to notice them, but to develop them, turning raw strengths into skills, and then aligning those skills with the work that we do in the world. That, I believe, is the key to happiness. How to identify and develop your strengths. Identifying your strengths isn't really always straightforward. Sometimes we need a little bit of help. Someone to reflect back when we can't see it in ourselves. That can look like a parent, a teacher who notices what lights you up, a mentor who sees a through line in your wins, an assessment that gives you language to your gifts. I was lucky. I had a mom who saw my love of storytelling, reading, and helping others. She guided me towards a path where strengths mattered, and years later, a mentor entered my life who would make a profound impact. She not only asked me a question I'll never forget, and I'll talk more about that later, but she also introduced me to an assessment when I was 41 years old where it all finally clicked. It gave me permission to stop obsessing over fixing my weaknesses and instead doubling down on refining my strengths, while building partnerships and processes to cover what wasn't mine to carry. It feels counterintuitive, but it's not. You know, once you identify your strengths, then turning them into skills is what can help you create alignment with the work that you do. It's incumbent upon us to nurture, first identify and discern the strengths, either with the help of others or in this case, this assessment that also helped me, and then make deliberate choices like picking activities in school, when you're younger, or at work that stretch your gifts, choosing college courses and certificates that deepen them, pursuing roles and projects that convert strengths into repeatable, reliable skills, right? So your strengths, when developed, can become skills. That's the first part of the equation for living your purpose. When I was a manager, I used to tell people who were frustrated by a colleague who was underperforming, I said, look, nobody wakes up in the morning trying to screw things up, right? More often, we wake up with the intention to do a great job. I think it's how we're wired. But something along the way, whether they're miscasted in a role, they're misaligned, for the most part, is where you see the underperformance. Alignment is not an accident. You need to be intentional about shaping what God gave us into tools that serve. And that's the work, right? The discernment, discovery, and then development. And then lastly, alignment. When we do that, when we let the light shine unobstructed, we step into God's intended purpose for us. St. Ignatius of Loyola said, "No one knows what God would do with us if they did not oppose so many obstacles to his grace." And that's the challenge, isn't it? The obstacles to alignment, both internal and external. Obstacles or derailers show up both inside and outside of us. Some are the inner voices that chip away at our confidence. Others are some of the external systems, structures, and environments that weren't designed with us in mind. Both can cloud and even block the light that we've been given. Internal obstacles, self-doubt, whispers that you're not ready, that you're not worthy. Conditioning, telling us to play small, follow the rules, stay quiet. Trauma, whether personal, cultural, or generational, leaves us carrying a weight that isn't ours. Inherited fear is the kind our well-intended families pass down to us to keep us safe from failure and rejection. It's loving, but it can also become a way to dim our light. External obstacles look like systemic barriers, of course, bias, discrimination, inequitable opportunities that can limit access no matter how talented or prepared we are. Institutional expectations that reward conformity instead of authenticity. Cultural scripts that dictate who belongs where and who doesn't. Limited access and opportunity that close doors before we even get to knock. And for children of immigrants, these challenges are often amplified. We inherit unspoken rules. Don't fail in public. Don't stand out too much. Don't waste the sacrifice that got you here. The scripts come wrapped in love, but they dim the very light that we were called to shine. If you follow my writing on the Tag Collab, you know that I often linger here on these cultural scripts, on the intergenerational weight of immigration, on how we can both honor our family sacrifices and unlearn some of the stuff that may keep us small. Have you ever noticed how much time we try to fix what's wrong with us? From school report cards that had a C instead of celebrating the A. I mean, how many times did you take a report card home? Or do we do this as parents, right? That the report card's full of A's and then there's a C. What's the conversation at the dinner table? The C, right? We focus more on what's broken. But what if that lens has been holding us back? I know it sounds counterintuitive, but as humans, we're wired to negativity bias, a survival mechanism that keeps our ancestors safe, that kept our ancestors safe by paying more attention to threats than to opportunities. The problem is that wiring leaks into our that type of wiring, it leaks into our self-perception. We zoom in on shortcomings, flaws, insecurities because our brain treats them like threats. Society reinforces it. Parents, teachers, bosses, often unintentionally and actually well-intentioned, spend more time correcting our weaknesses than amplifying what's already working. Even our self-talk falls into more of the trap, if only I could be better, instead of I'm great at, how do I use that more? No wonder when I tell people, we'll go further refining your strengths than fixing your weaknesses, their eyes light up. It's like permission they've been waiting for. So let's stop fixing your flaws, and start soaring with your strengths. One of the most impactful lessons I've learned about life and even parenting and work, right, is that we spend far more time trying to fix our defects than refining and excelling at our strengths. Years ago, a mentor of mine asked me a question I'll never forget. She was the same mentor that I mentioned before about the assessment that helped me change the way I operate, helping me see my strengths more clearly, and giving me permission to lean into them rather than trying to fix my weaknesses. She said, when you were a kid, if you brought home a report card with all C's and with all A's and one C, what was the topic of conversation at dinner that night? For so many of us, the answer is obvious. The conversation focused on the C. Even with the report card full of excellence, we zoom in on the shortfall. It's how many of us were raised, how many of us were managed at work, and how many of us instinctively parent our own kids. We were trained to spot gaps, weaknesses, and flaws, and pour our energy into fixing them. But what if I told you that that's backwards? I remember reading a book. It's called Soaring with Your Strengths by Donald Clifton and Paula Nelson, which makes the bold claim that you can't be anything you want to be. You can't be anything you want to be, but you can be a lot more of what you already are. Instead of trying to be well-rounded individuals, we should double down on our unique talents and natural strengths. It reminds me of the fable in that same book that the animals in the forest who started, they got to go to school. And so all the animals were super excited. There was a rat, the rabbit, the fish, and the squirrel, right? So they're all excited. They're going to school the next day, and the rabbit, it's hopping class, running class, and he does great. So he gets home and he tells his parents, "Hey, oh my God, I love school. This is so fantastic." Of course, he was wired to be a great runner, a great hopper, right? Next day, it's climbing class. And he, of course, fails miserably because he can't climb trees. That's what the squirrel was good at. And the next day, it's swimming class. Of course, he almost drowns. And, the parents get called into school and they say to them, Rabbit is so good at running, but so we're going to put him in more climbing class and swimming class. And so, of course, this is what we do to people at work. This is what we do to ourselves. Of course, he goes, now he's put into these classes of things he's just not naturally good at. And so they're just even more difficult. And he begins to hate school. Why? Because instead of being put in something he's really great at and becoming the best runner, the best hopper, and you know what? Maybe if he has to do a triathlon, he can partner up with the fish and with the squirrel. Instead, he's being put to spend more time on the things that are his weaknesses. And so that kind of is the mentality that I have really learned to manage people around, is figuring out what their strengths are, helping them develop them, and then creating teams based upon that, because teams are what should be well-rounded, not individuals. It's impossible, especially, this doesn't mean we ignore weaknesses entirely. Where we have deficiencies, we have to look for the right partners to offset them. We also have sometimes, we learn to use some of our strengths to compensate for the things we're not that good at. That's the art of building great teams, recognizing what you do brilliantly and where you need support. As a leader as well, the first place when you spend time taking leadership training, as you know, many of you know that I have a master's degree in management and leadership. What I enjoyed so much about that master's was that I had to first look internally and see where my weaknesses were so that I could, get to know myself more. First of all, it was to get to know what my strengths were and then what my weaknesses were, so that then I could help build teams that offset perhaps my weaknesses. It changed the way that I operated completely. But first, leadership is all about learning first internally and increasing your emotional intelligence. If you're building a house, you can't only, going back to the topic of teams, if you're building a house, you can't only hire bricklayers. You also need electricians, plumbers, roofers, designers, people with different skill sets who together can create something none of them alone could build. It's the same in business, in community work, and in families. When building a team, it's important to recognize the balance or to spot where the team could be lacking a fundamental skill set. I've applied this thinking both at work and at home. And as a parent, I remind myself that my children do not need to be equally great at everything. In fact, in Spanish, we often say que el que mucho abarca poco aprieta. So the translation, hold on, let me think of this through. To that is, he who takes on too much squeezes very little. Excellence is about squeezing, right? And about becoming the best version of yourself is about sort of vibrating at this level of excellence. And the only way to do that is by deciding that you're going to double down on your strengths and make them into incredible skills and unique talents that you can bring to a team. So it's natural to want to improve the weaknesses, especially when they cause real obstacles. But if we spend all our energy fixing the C's, we risk neglecting the A's, the places where you could become exceptional. So the next time you're tempted to obsess over the C, ask yourself, what would happen if I invested that time into my A's instead? What could I take? How could I take what I'm naturally good at and make it world class? How could I build partnerships and teams that complement the places where I'm less strong? Because in the end, nobody remembers the middle of the road dogs who tried to fly. We remember the people who, the rabbits, right, who were excellent at running. I often say, imagine Michael Phelps, an Olympian. If his mother, they would have brought her in and said, Michael's so good at swimming that now, but we want him to be better at running. And so now you have a mediocre swimmer and a mediocre runner, right? The case for refining strengths instead of fixing weaknesses, okay? Here's the truth. Weakness fixing leads to average. You might not get to good enough, but you rarely get to exceptional. Strength refining leads to advantage. When you double down on what comes naturally, you compound the energy, the joy, and the skill. That's where competitive advantage is born. And you know what? Like I've said it before, there is no glory in martyrdom. I can never say this word, being a martyr. What we are naturally good at are things that it flows easier, right? But sometimes we find this glory in fixing these weaknesses. And I'm here to tell you that what you're doing is shortchanging yourself from being able to be exceptional. You or your children or whoever you manage, right? You compensate in other ways by building a team that compensates for that. Energy flows, like I said, with strengths. Working on weaknesses drains us. It's refining strengths that energize us. That energy is what sustains growth over the long haul. How to reframe your approach to growth. Think of strength as instruments. You could spend your whole life trying to play the ones that you were not built for, or you could become a world class at the ones that are already in your hands. The shift is simple but radical. Don't ask, how do I get better at what I'm bad at? Ask, how do I use more of what I'm great at? Instead of pouring effort into patching weaknesses, design your career, your leadership, even your daily routines to showcase and stretch your strengths. Delegate, automate, or collaborate around the rest. Permission to be brilliant at what you already do best. Here's your permission slip if you need it, okay? You don't need to be good at everything. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to perfect every flaw. You need to master being you. When you refine your skills, you create impact with less friction. You stop fighting uphill battles. You feel in the flow. And you unlock what so many miss, your unique competitive edge. That's the secret, people. When they say, when I tell them this, they said, oh my God, it's so true, right? While this article is written for individuals, it has shaped the way that I parent as well. I am a very big fan of the assessment Clifton Strength Finders. It's the assessment that I mentioned changed my life at 41. I've done it for my kids, and I've even created a ChatGPT to help them manage and identify what they're good at. And it's also helped me parent and manage them better, because there is what we're naturally good at, or our natural strengths are also how we see the world, right? What energizes us. In my case, one of my strongest skill set is problem solving, right? It's why I'm very good at startups. Whether I was in my last job, I was part of, yes, an organization that well established, but what kept me there for so long was the ability to create that I was creating new programming, new departments, new workflows. So that type of problem solving kept me very motivated and kept me there. In many ways, I often said that I was an intrapreneur inside of the organizations. That's what it means when you have that skill set or that mindset, and you work that way in an organization. Now today I'm an entrepreneur, which is using that skill set outside. Like I've said before, being a manager and studying management also helped the way that I parent, right? Our children don't need to be, I tell my kids that they don't need to be good at everything. They need the freedom to discover what lights them up. It's the type of thing, if you're looking to understand what lights you up first without taking an assessment, what I'll tell you is listening to yourself. And watch yourself when you react to certain opportunities. What gets your heart pumping and what maybe feels heavy, right? That's the difference between what you maybe naturally be good at or not. For me, being a problem solver, knowing that I can solve a problem, knowing that among other strengths that, I'm not going to get into it here, but using my other strengths as well, that combination helps me to, I can feel it. It's different than if you asked me to do something that I'm not that great at, right? Just as leaders, we build well-rounded teams. Parents raise well-rounded families by nurturing each child's unique strengths and surrounding them with the support in the areas where they're less strong. The lesson is the same. Stop pouring all your energy into fixing their C's and start investing in the A's, noticing what are their gifts. They need help oftentimes figuring that out. And then give your children the permission to lean into their gifts so that they can align their lives with their light. Just questions to reflect on after listening to this or reading this is, which weaknesses am I wasting too much time trying to fix? Which strength, if I refined and showcase it, could change the game for me right now? And as a parent, how can I model this shift so my children grow up seeing their strengths as their greatest asset? Because the truth is that no one ever won being flawless. They won being brilliant at their strengths. So where are you letting your obstacles, your inherited fear, dim your light? I can also tell you that in dimming your light or not being aligned with the purpose that you have, that little light that God sent, and He's hoping you discover those strengths so that you can turn them into skills, create alignment with the work you do in the world, is a key part, I believe, of happiness. So that's a wrap for today. If any of this hit home for you, sit with it, speak on it, or send it to someone who needs it. Your transitions deserve tenderness. Your brain is brilliant, but it's not the boss of you. You are. Keep rewriting the scripts, keep honoring your duality, and most of all, keep showing up even in mid-process. Make sure to follow, subscribe, and share. This is the Tag Collab. Remember, I'm on podcast, on YouTube, Substack. So I hope you join me next time. Take care. And if you have any questions about strengths and the assessment, DM me, and I'd be happy to talk to you about how you can do some of this work. All right? Thank you.